The door swung open, and I froze, shirt half off, heart slamming against my ribs. Jamie stood there, his hazel eyes wide, a grocery bag slipping from his grip to the floor. In that split second, the air in our cramped San Francisco apartment thickened, like the world had paused to watch what we'd do next. I'd always known Jamie was beautiful, not just handsome, but beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. 3 years of living together, sharing late-night takeout and bad TV, had carved his presence into my life like a song I couldn't stop humming. But we were roommates, best friends, nothing more. Or so I told myself. Every time my gaze lingered too long on the curve of his jaw or the way his laugh lit up the room. Alex. Jamie started, then stopped, his voice catching like he'd swallowed the rest of the sentence. He didn't move, didn't look away. The grocery bag lay forgotten, apples rolling across the hardwood. I clutched my shirt to my chest, suddenly aware of every inch of exposed skin, every unspoken word piling up between us. I've waited too long to pretend we're just roommates, he said finally, his words low, raw, like they'd been ripped from somewhere deep. My breath hitched. 3 years of brushing past each other in the hallway, of pretending I didn't notice how his hand lingered when he passed me a coffee mug, of ignoring the way my heart raced when he said my name. I'd all crashed into that moment. I wanted to speak, to say something clever or brave, but my tongue felt heavy, my thoughts a jumble of what if and too late. Jamie, what are you saying? I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I stepped toward him, the shirt slipping from my fingers to the floor. His eyes flicked down, then back up, and I saw a flicker of something I'd always hoped was there, but never dared believe. I'm saying I'm tired of pretending, he said, stepping closer, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. I'm saying I've been in love with you since the day we moved in, and I can't keep acting like I'm not. The room spun. Love. He'd said it. The word hung between us, fragile and heavy, like a glass ornament teetering on the edge of a shelf. I wanted to grab it, hold it close, but fear clawed at me. What if this ruined us? What if love wasn't enough to bridge the gap between roommates and whatever came next? Jamie. My voice cracked, and I hated how small it sounded. I don't know how to do this. What if we mess it up? He smiled, soft and sad, like he'd been carrying the same fear. What if we don't? He asked, his hand brushing mine. Tentative. Electric. My skin burned where his fingers grazed, and I didn't pull away. We'd met in college, at a dive bar in the Mission District where the beer was cheap and the jukebox only played songs from the 90s. Jamie was the guy who could make anyone laugh, who'd dance with strangers and charm the bartender into free drinks. I was the quiet one, sketching in the corner, content to watch the world unfold. Somehow, we clicked. When he suggested we split rent on a tiny apartment after graduation, I said yes without thinking. It felt right, like puzzle pieces snapping together. Living with Jamie was easy too easy. Mornings spent arguing over who made better coffee. Evenings sprawled on the couch dissecting old movies. But there were moments, fleeting and dangerous, when the air shifted. Like when he'd fall asleep against my shoulder during a late-night marathon, his breath warm against my neck. Or when I'd catch him watching me sketch, his eyes soft in a way that made my stomach flip. I never acted on it. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, I'd learned to keep my feelings locked tight. My parents were kind but clueless. The kind who'd say love is love, but flinch at the sight of two guys holding hands. I'd come out in college, but the fear of rejection still lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. Jamie. Thuff was different. He'd grown up in Seattle, raised by a mom who marched in pride parades and a dad who taught him to fix cars. He was open, unapologetic, but he'd never said a word about us. Until now. That night, after his confession, we didn't kiss. We didn't fall into each other's arms like in some rom-com. Instead, we sat on the couch, knees touching, and talked until the city outside went quiet. He told me about the first time he realized he loved Muhin. I'd stayed up all night, helping him study for a final. My sketches abandoned on the table. I admitted I'd kept every stupid note he'd left on the fridge, tucked away in a drawer like treasures. But the fear didn't vanish. What if love changed us? What if we couldn't go back? I went to bed that night with his words echoing in my head, my heart a tangled mess of hope and dread. The next morning, San Francisco was blanketed in fog, the kind that makes everything feel like a dream. Jamie was already in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, humming some cheesy pop song. He looked up when I walked in, and his smile was cautious, like he was waiting for me to bolt. "Pancakes," he offered, sliding a plate toward me. His fingers brushed mine, and I felt that same electric jolt. "Thanks," I said, sitting at the counter, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. The silence wasn't awkward, but it was heavy, full of things we hadn't said yet. I wanted to tell him I loved him too, that I'd loved him for years, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I asked, "What happens now?" He set the spatula down, leaning against the counter. "We figure it out," he said simply. "Together." It sounded so easy, but life isn't a movie. That afternoon, I got a call from my sister, Emma, who'd moved to New York after college. She was my confidant, the one who'd always known I was gay before I said it out loud. When I told her about Jamie, she laughed, her voice crackling through the phone. "Finally," she said, "I've been waiting for you two to stop being idiots. But, Alex, be careful. Love's messy. You're not just roommates anymore." Her words stuck with me, a warning and a promise. That night, Jamie and I went for a walk along the Embarcadero, the bay sparkling under the lights. He reached for my hand, and I let him take it, my heart pounding. It felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying. But the world didn't end. No one stared. No lightning struck. Just two guys holding hands, walking through the city, daring to hope. The weeks that followed were a blur of newness and nerves. Jamie and I were testing the waters, learning what it meant to be more than roommates. A brush of hands in the kitchen became a kiss. Quick and shy. That left me dizzy. A late-night movie turned into us tangled on the couch, his head on my chest, my fingers tracing patterns on his arm. Every moment felt like a gift, but also a risk, like we were building something fragile that could shatter with one wrong move. San Francisco seemed to hum with our secret. The city, with its rainbow flags and open hearts, felt like the perfect backdrop, but it wasn't all golden. I worked as a graphic designer for a small startup, and Jamie was a barista at a trendy coffee shop in the Castro. Our schedules clashed, and the stress of bills and long hours crept in. One night, after a double shift, Jamie came home exhausted. His usual spark dimmed. "You okay?" I asked, setting my sketchpad aside. He was slumped on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "Just tired," he said, but his voice was flat. I slid closer, resting a hand on his knee. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. "Talk to me," I said softly. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "It's not you, Alex. It's just life. Work's brutal, and I'm worried we're moving too fast. What if we're not ready for this?" His words hit like a punch. I'd been so caught up in the thrill of us that I hadn't stopped to think about the weight of it. "Do you want to slow down?" I asked, my throat tight. "No," he said quickly, turning to face me. His eyes were earnest, almost desperate. "I want this. I want you, but I'm scared we'll screw it up. I nodded, swallowing hard. Me too. But we're in this together. Right? He smiled, small but real, and leaned his forehead against mine. Yeah. Together. The first real test came a month later. My parents were visiting from Ohio. Their first trip to San Francisco since I'd moved. I hadn't told them about Jamie, not the full truth. They knew we were roommates. Best friends. But the word boyfriend felt like a landmine. Jamie, ever the optimist, thought it'd be fine. Let's have them over, he said one morning. Pouring coffee. We'll cook. Charm them. Show them we're just two normal guys. I laughed, but it was hollow. You don't know my parents. They're not bad people. They just don't get it. He reached across the counter, squeezing my hand. Then we'll help them get it. The dinner was a disaster. My mom kept asking about my dating life. Her voice tight, like she was fishing for something safe. My dad barely spoke, his eyes fixed on his plate. Jamie tried to keep things light, telling stories about the city. But the tension was suffocating. When he casually mentioned we were together, my mom's fork froze midair. Together, she echoed, her voice sharp. Like roommates. No, Mom, I said, my heart pounding. Like together. We're dating. The silence was deafening. My dad cleared his throat, mumbling something about the weather. My mom's lips pressed into a thin line, and I saw the disappointment in her eyes. They left early, promising to call, but I knew they wouldn't. Not soon. Anyway, back at the apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, my face in my hands. Jamie sat beside me, quiet for once. I'm sorry, he said finally. I thought, it's not your fault. I cut in, my voice muffled. It's them. It's me for thinking they'd understand. He pulled me into his arms, and I let him, my tears soaking into his shirt. They'll come around, he whispered, but I wasn't sure I believed him. The fallout lingered. I threw myself into work, sketching until my hands ached, trying to drown out the hurt. Jamie, bless him, didn't push. He left little notes around the apartment. You're enough, on the bathroom mirror. I'm here tucked into my sketchbook. They were small, but they kept me grounded. One evening, we went to a pride event in the Castro, a street festival bursting with color and music. Jamie dragged me onto the dance floor, his laugh infectious as we spun under the lights. For a moment, I forgot about my parents, about the fear that we'd break what we'd built. I kissed him there, in the middle of the crowd, and it felt like a rebellion, like claiming something I'd been too scared to own. But the world has a way of complicating things. A week later, Jamie got a call from his mom. His dad had had a heart attack, nothing fatal, but serious enough to need surgery. Jamie needed to go to Seattle, and he asked me to come with him. I can't do this alone, he said, his voice shaking. I need you. I didn't hesitate. I'm there. The flight to Seattle was quiet. Jamie's hand tight in mine. I could feel his fear, his love for his dad, and it made me love him more. But I also knew this trip would test us in ways we hadn't faced yet. His family was supportive, but hospitals, stress, and uncertainty have a way of cracking even the strongest bonds. Seattle was gray and rainy. The hospital a maze of sterile hallways and beeping machines. Jamie's dad, Tom, was stable but weak, his face pale against the white sheets. Jamie's mom, Sarah, greeted me with a warm hug, her eyes tired but kind. Thank you for coming, Alex, she said, and I felt a pang of guilt for how much I'd dreaded this trip. Jamie was a rock, holding his mom's hand, joking with his dad to keep the mood light. But I saw the cracks his hands trembling when he thought no one was watching. The way he'd stare out the hospital window like he was carrying the world. I did what I could, brought coffee, ran errands, held him when he finally let himself cry in the hotel room at night. "You don't have to stay," he said one evening, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "This isn't your mess. It's our mess," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." His eyes searched mine, and he kissed me, slow and deep, like he was anchoring himself to me. It wasn't just lovey, it was trust, raw and unguarded. I realized then how much we'd grown, how we'd become each other's safe place. Tom's surgery went well, but recovery was slow. We stayed in Seattle for 2 weeks, balancing hospital visits with moments of normalcy, walks along the waterfront, late-night burgers at a greasy diner. Sarah insisted we stay at their house instead of the hotel, and I saw where Jamie got his warmth. Their home was cluttered with photos, books, and memories of a family that loved fiercely. It made me miss my own parents, but it also made me angry. Why couldn't they see what Jamie's family saw, that love was love, no matter who it was for? One night, over dinner, Sarah asked about my family. I hesitated, but Jamie squeezed my hand under the table, giving me courage. I told her about the disastrous dinner, about my parents' silence. She listened, her face soft with understanding. "Give them time," she said. "It's not about you or Jamie. It's about them unlearning what they've been taught." Her words stayed with me, a flicker of hope in the hurt. When we got back to San Francisco, I wrote my parents a letter, not an email, but a real letter, poured out on paper. I told them about Jamie, about how he made me feel alive, about how I wasn't asking for their approval, but their love. I didn't know if they'd read it, but it felt like a weight lifted. Back in our apartment, life settled into a new rhythm. Jamie and I were more open now, less afraid of the word boyfriend. We cooked together, went on real dates, kissed in public without looking over our shoulders. But the world wasn't always kind. At work, a coworker made a snide comment about the gay guy in design, and though I brushed it off, it stung. Jamie faced worse customers at the coffee shop who'd sneer when he mentioned his boyfriend, a manager who passed him over for a promotion because he was too flamboyant. We talked about it one night, lying in bed, the city's hum outside our window. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it," Jamie admitted, his voice quiet. "Not us, just the fight. The way people look at us." I turned to face him, my hand resting on his cheek. "You're worth it," I said. "We're worth it." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I knew he was thinking about his dad, about the fragility of life, about how much we had to lose. I pulled him close, and we fell asleep like that, tangled together, holding on. The turning point came unexpectedly. Jamie's coffee shop hosted an open mic night, and he'd been working on a poem for weeks, scribbling in a notebook he kept hidden. He didn't tell me he was performing until the last minute, dragging me to the event with a nervous grin. "I'm gonna bomb," he said, fidgeting backstage. "You're gonna be amazing," I told him, kissing his forehead. When he stepped onto the stage, the room went quiet. His poem was about the moment he walked in on me changing, about the years of silence, about the courage it took to say "I love you." His voice shook at first, then grew steady, each word raw and beautiful. The crowd was silent, then erupted into applause, some people wiping tears. I was crying too, my heart so full it hurt. When he came off stage, I pulled him into a hug, not caring who saw. "You're incredible," I whispered. He laughed, his eyes bright. "We're incredible." That night, we walked home hand in hand, the city alive around us. For the first time, I felt like we could face anything: bigots, family drama, our own fears. We weren't just roommates anymore. We were a team, a love story, A fight worth fighting. Months passed, and our life together deepened. We started talking about the future, not just next week, but years from now. Jamie wanted to open his own coffee shop, a place where everyone felt welcome. I dreamed of freelancing, turning my sketches into something more. We made plans over late-night wine, laughing about where we'd live, what dog we'd adopt. It felt like building a life, piece by piece. But the past has a way of creeping back. My parents hadn't responded to my letter, and the silence gnawed at me. Jamie noticed. Of course, they always did. One evening, he handed me his phone. My mom's number already dialed. Call her, he said gently. You'll regret it if you don't. I stared at the phone, my stomach twisting. What if she hangs up? Then you tried, he said, his hand on my shoulder. That's what matters. I called. My mom answered, her voice hesitant. We talked awkwardly at first, then more openly. She admitted she'd been scared. Not of me, but of what she didn't understand. She'd read my letter, cried over it, showed it to my dad. They weren't ready to march in a pride parade, but they wanted to try. They invited us to Ohio for Thanksgiving. And though I wasn't sure I was ready, I said yes. Jamie hugged me after I hung up, his grin wide. See? Told you. Don't get cocky, I teased. But I was smiling too. Thanksgiving was surreal. My parents' house smelled like sage and nostalgia. But the air was different this time. My mom hugged Jamie, a little stiffly, but it was a start. My dad asked him about his dad's recovery, and Jamie answered with his usual charm. Over dinner, there were no big declarations, no tearful apologies, just small steps toward understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that was enough for now. Back in San Francisco, we threw ourselves into our dreams. Jamie enrolled in a business course, sketching out plans for his coffee shop. I took on freelance projects, my sketches turning into logos and book covers. We were busy, sometimes too busy, but we always found time for each author, a stolen kiss in the kitchen, a walk through Golden Gate Park, a quiet night on the couch. One evening, Jamie came home with a small velvet box. My heart stopped. Is that? Not yet, he said, laughing at my panic. Just a promise. Inside was a simple silver ring, engraved with our initials. He slid it onto my finger, his eyes soft. I want forever with you, Alex. This is just the start. I kissed him, my heart so full I thought it might burst. Forever sounds good, I whispered. Years later, I'd look back on that moment, Jamie walking in while I was changing, his confession shattering the walls we'd built as the start of everything. We faced challenges, a rough patch when Jamie's coffee shop struggled to open, a health scare that reminded us how fragile life is, moments of doubt when the world felt too heavy. But we faced them together, our love a quiet strength that carried us through. We weren't just roommates anymore. We were partners, dreamers, fighters. And every time I looked at Jamie, his laugh, his warmth, the way he made every day brighter, I knew we'd made the right choice. Love wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Always.